What really happened to the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in maritime history? In this deep dive, we explore the unsolved mystery of the abandoned brigantine, its vanished crew, and the chilling secrets of one of the greatest ship disappearances in the Atlantic. Imagine sailing the vast Atlantic in late autumn of 1872, waves crashing against your vessel and a thick mist hanging over the water. Out of nowhere, the lookout on a passing ship notices a silhouette in the fog, a brigantine drifting aimlessly, sails fluttering, but no one at the helm. This ship is the Mary Celeste, a vessel that left New York City on November 7th, bound for Genoa, Italy, with a cargo of just over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Its journey should have taken a straightforward month, yet here it was, over 400 nautical miles east of the Azores, moving erratically as though guided by an unseen hand. The Mary Celeste was a sturdy, well-maintained brigantine, built in 1861, and originally named the Amazon. By 1868, after collisions and repairs, she had been rechristened and sailed reliably under American ownership. Her captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs, was an experienced and highly respected mariner from Massachusetts. On this voyage, he was accompanied by his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, and 7 carefully chosen crew members, all seasoned sailors. This was meant to be a routine journey, one of many for a ship and crew of this caliber. On December 4th, 1872, the Canadian merchant ship DEI Gracia, captained by David Morehouse, spotted the Mary Celeste. Morehouse recognized the vessel immediately and felt a chill. He knew Briggs personally. Something about the ship's movement was wrong. Its sails were partially torn, rigging hanging loose, and the deck was unnervingly empty. Calling out to the brigantine yielded nothing but the groan of timber and the whistle of wind through broken canvas. Morehouse ordered his chief mate, Oliver DeVoe, to lower a small boat and board the drifting ship. As they approached, a haunting silence greeted them. The deck was deserted, no faces appeared at the rail, and the air was filled with the eerie creak of a vessel moving on its own. Once aboard, they would find a ship in disarray, but far from ruined. Water in the hold, some sails missing, but no signs of fire, struggle, or foul play. And yet, every human being on board, the captain, his family, and the crew, had vanished. The Mary Celeste discovery would set in motion one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in history. A perfectly sound ship, adrift in the Atlantic, crewless yet still sailing. How could 10 experienced people, including a young family, simply disappear without a trace? That is where our story begins. A tale of oceanic suspense, human fear, and a mystery that has haunted the seas for nearly 150 years. As Oliver DeVoe and his men clambered onto the Mary Celeste, the first thing they noticed was a damp, musty chill. Rainwater had seeped into the lower decks, leaving puddles sloshing across the wooden floor. The smell of brine mixed with mildew filled the air. Yet despite the wet conditions, the ship was structurally sound. Its hull intact, its masts upright, and the rigging capable of holding the remaining sails. Everything suggested that the ship could have continued sailing without trouble. Walking through the crew's quarters, the men found personal belongings scattered but untouched in a peculiar way. Raincoats, boots, tobacco pipes, and other small valuables lay exactly where they had been stored. Nothing had been looted, and no one had tried to fight or defend the ship. The cabins of Captain Briggs, Sarah, and little Sophia were particularly striking. Sarah's jewelry box sat neatly on a dresser, and the child's toys were left on the floor, as though someone had simply stepped away for a moment. A bed still held the faint impression of a child's form, a chilling reminder that life had been abruptly interrupted. In the galley, utensils were scattered across the counters and floor, but there was no meal, no steaming coffee, no breakfast waiting to be eaten, despite what later rumors suggested. Fresh food and water were abundant, enough to sustain the crew for months. Below deck, the cargo hold revealed almost all 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol intact, except for 9 that were empty. This minor discrepancy would later fuel theories about chemical leaks and panicked decisions. On deck, the scene was equally puzzling. One of the ship's 2 lifeboats was missing. The davits that normally held it were swung outward, and the railing bore scrapes, hinting at a hasty launch. Navigational instruments, the chronometer, sextant, and ship's register, were gone, carefully taken along. Yet items like boots and raincoats, which would have been essential in a dangerous evacuation, were left behind. The main pump had been disassembled on deck, its pieces laid out with meticulous order. A sounding rod lay nearby, perhaps recently used to measure water in the hold. It was as if the crew had fled in both urgency and precision, leaving a trail of questions instead of answers. No signs of struggle, fire, or piracy existed anywhere on board. The cargo of alcohol, a valuable commodity, had not been disturbed. Nothing in the cabins, hold, or deck indicated a violent attack, and yet 10 lives had vanished from this ship. Captain Briggs, his wife, their toddler, and 7 sailors had left a perfectly seaworthy vessel for the uncertain safety of a small rowboat in the middle of the Atlantic. This discovery left the DEI Gracia crew with a profound sense of unease. How could a ship in such condition, sailing intact and provisioned, be abandoned in this way? As they prepared to sail her to Gibraltar, every corner of the Mary Celeste seemed to whisper a single question. What drove these people from a ship that could have carried them safely across the ocean? The answers were nowhere in sight, and the mystery was just beginning to unfold. To understand the enigma of the Mary Celeste, we must step back and examine the people on board and the journey they had embarked upon. The ship, originally named the Amazon, was launched in Canada in 1861 and had already experienced a string of misfortunes. A captain lost to pneumonia on its maiden voyage, a collision at sea, and a grounding during a storm. In 1886, she was salvaged, sold to American owners, repaired, and rechristened the Mary Celeste. From that point, she had earned a reputation for reliability, completing voyages without major incident, at least until November of 1872. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a man born into a seafaring Massachusetts family, commanded the vessel with precision and calm authority. Known for his fairness, religiosity, and sobriety, Briggs had personally selected a crew of experienced sailors from Northern Europe, men whose reputations were solid and whose conduct was beyond reproach. His first mate, Albert Richardson, had sailed with him on previous journeys, reinforcing the sense of trust and competence aboard the ship. Adding a unique personal element to this voyage was Briggs's family. His wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, accompanied him, while their 7-year-old son remained at home attending school. Before departure, Sarah had penned letters full of excitement and anticipation for the journey across the Atlantic. The captain's cabin had been arranged thoughtfully, with personal comforts for his family, including a sewing machine and a small organ, turning a working vessel into a temporary home for loved ones. The Mary Celeste departed New York City on November the 7th, 1872, bound for Genoa, Italy, carrying just over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Initially, the voyage was uneventful, but rough weather began to batter the ship shortly after departure. Heavy seas tossed the brigantine, and gusting winds tested both sails and rigging. Yet throughout these early challenges, the crew maintained routine discipline, as documented in the ship's meticulous logbook. The last log entry was recorded at 8 a.m. on November 25th, near the Azores, noting standard position and course without any indication of alarm. Beyond this entry, the record abruptly stops, leaving a 10-day gap before the ship was discovered adrift. During that time, something occurred that prompted Captain Briggs to abandon a fully functional, well-provisioned ship into the open Atlantic with only a small lifeboat. A decision that defied logic and left no immediate evidence behind. What could have forced 10 experienced people, including a family, from safety into a frail rowboat? That question has haunted historians and maritime experts for nearly a century and a half. As the Mary Celeste continued her ghostly drift, every deck plank, every barrel, and every personal item left behind became a clue to a puzzle that remains unsolved. The voyage itself, while seemingly routine, now reads like a prelude to disaster. A combination of stormy weather, volatile cargo, and unknown pressures may have created a scenario that tested even the calmest of minds. With no signs of external attack or mutiny, the Atlantic waters themselves became the silent witness to a mystery that still baffles the world. It was the morning of December 4th, 1872, when the Canadian brig D.I. Gracia, captained by David Morehouse, spotted something unusual on the horizon, approximately 400 nautical miles east of the Azores. Through fog and spray, a two-masted vessel appeared, drifting erratically, its sails battered and flapping in the wind. As the D.I. Gracia drew closer, Morehouse recognized the ship with a shock. It was the Mary Celeste, overdue for weeks on its journey from New York to Genoa. The scene was surreal. The Mary Celeste was fully afloat. Not wrecked, but there was not a single human on deck. No flags were raised to signal distress. No signs of struggle. Only the groaning of timber and the fluttering of torn sails in the wind. A profound silence enveloped the brigantine, the kind that made seasoned sailors uneasy. Morehouse ordered his chief mate, Oliver Deveau, to take 2 sailors, lower a boat, and board the drifting vessel. As Deveau and his men clambered onto the deck, their voices echoed across the empty ship, met with no reply. The ship was a ghostly snapshot of abandonment. Personal items and essential equipment lay scattered, but there was no evidence of a violent confrontation. Rain gear, boots, tobacco pipes, and even small personal belongings remained, left behind as if their owners had intended to return. Below deck, the cabins revealed a quiet but chilling scene. Captain Briggs's quarters, where his wife Sarah and daughter Sophia had stayed, were untouched. Toys were scattered on the floor, a small organ sat in place, and Sarah's jewelry box rested unopened. The impression of a sleeping child's form remained on a berth, frozen in time, hinting at life moments before the disappearance. The galley contained ample food and water, enough to sustain the crew for another 6 months, and the stove had been knocked askew, but no meal awaited anyone. The ship's cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol was mostly intact, though 9 barrels were empty, detail later noted as potentially significant. Even more unsettling, the Mary Celeste lifeboat was missing, along with the chronometer, the sextant, and the ship's register, all vital tools for navigation. The main pump had been partially disassembled and left on deck, suggesting that the crew had been actively managing water in the hold. Water was present, about 3.5 feet, yet nothing indicated immediate peril requiring abandonment of a seaworthy vessel. As the D.I. Gracia crew worked to bring the ship to Gibraltar, every plank and hatch of the Mary Celeste whispered unanswered questions. Why had 10 competent, experienced people, including a family, left a stable ship with provisions for months into the dangerous Atlantic waters? What had driven them to trust a small lifeboat over the stability of the brigantine itself? By December 13th, when the Mary Celeste arrived in Gibraltar, it had become a sensation. Sailors, merchants, and officials alike were drawn to the mystery of the ghost ship, a silent witness to a disappearance that defied logic. The vessel was more than a salvage ship. It was a puzzle, a maritime enigma that would spark speculation, theories, and legends for generations to come. When the Mary Celeste finally reached Gibraltar on December 13th, 1872, the ghost ship immediately drew a crowd. Curious onlookers, merchants, and naval officers crowded the docks, eager to glimpse the vessel that had sailed hundreds of miles without a soul aboard. But amidst the intrigue, a legal question loomed. Who was entitled to the salvage reward for rescuing a ship in distress? Gibraltar's Attorney General, Frederick Solly Flood, took charge of the case. His role was to determine whether the crew of the DEI Gracia, who had risked their own lives boarding the drifting brigantine, deserved compensation for bringing the Mary Celeste safely to port. What started as a standard maritime salvage hearing quickly became the center of intense speculation. Solly Flood, known for his haughty demeanor, initially suspected foul play. He theorized that the DEI Gracia crew might have murdered Captain Briggs and his sailors to claim the valuable cargo for themselves. On paper, the theory seemed plausible. The DEI Gracia had arrived later, and the opportunity to claim salvage was real. But the evidence told a different story. There were no signs of a struggle, no injuries, and the brigantine itself had suffered only minor damage, consistent with rough seas, not violence. Moreover, Morehouse and Briggs had been acquaintances, trusted friends in the tight-knit maritime community. Frustrated, Solly Flood turned his scrutiny toward the Mary Celeste's own crew. Could mutiny or drunken chaos explain their disappearance? He claimed the ship showed signs of disorder that might indicate panic or an internal conflict, but this theory quickly unraveled. Captain Briggs was deeply respected, temperate, and averse to alcohol. His crew was experienced and loyal. The evidence suggested no confrontation had occurred, and the valuable cargo remained untouched. The hearings dragged on for 3 months. Witnesses testified about the condition of the ship, the cargo, and the scattered personal belongings, while experts examined every plank and barrel. Despite Solly Flood's insistence on foul play, no concrete proof emerged. The court ultimately commended the DEI Gracia crew for their skill and bravery, but awarded them only £1,700, a fraction of what the ship and its cargo were worth. The low reward, historians note, reflected lingering skepticism, but no accusations could be substantiated. Beyond the courtroom, the mystery captured public imagination. Newspapers across Europe and the United States reported breathless accounts of the abandoned vessel. Some journalists added dramatic embellishments, tales of warm meals left on the table, eerie cries on deck, and ghostly sightings at sea. These sensationalized stories would later merge with fact, creating the mythic aura that surrounds the Mary Celeste even today. By the end of the hearings, the official record offered no answers, only questions. The ship had been salvaged, the crew exonerated, and the cargo intact. But the disappearance itself remained a blank page. For historians, sailors, and armchair detectives alike, the Mary Celeste had become a riddle that defied conventional explanation. After the Gibraltar hearings concluded, the Mary Celeste faded from official headlines, but her story was far from over. The real mystery, 10 people vanishing from a seaworthy vessel, was fertile ground for writers, journalists, and storytellers eager to captivate the public. What began as a maritime enigma quickly evolved into a legend larger than life itself. In January 1884, more than a decade after the ship's disappearance, a young Arthur Conan Doyle anonymously published a short story titled J. Habakkuk Jepson's Statement. In it, Doyle recast the Mary Celeste, renamed the Marie Celeste, as the scene of a bloody mutiny and supernatural events. He invented a survivor, fabricated accounts of violence, and described the crew in perilous detail. Because the story was written as a first-person testimony, it blurred the line between fact and fiction, convincing many readers that the gruesome tale was true. The public was enthralled. Newspapers across Europe reprinted Doyle's story as though it were an actual report, and soon embellished accounts of the ship circulated widely. Some claimed that the captain's wife had been seen screaming from the deck, others that ghostly figures haunted the Atlantic waves. The combination of mystery and horror captured imaginations and cemented the Mary Celeste in popular culture as the ultimate ghost ship. Over time, speculation grew wilder. Theories ranged from encounters with giant sea monsters to rogue waves sweeping the crew off deck. Some journalists even tied the ship to the Bermuda Triangle, despite its location hundreds of miles away from the infamous region. By the early 20th century, alien abduction and supernatural phenomena were casually added to the list of potential explanations. Each new account distorted the facts further, obscuring the plausible reasons the crew had abandoned ship. This flood of fiction also had an unexpected consequence. It created a permanent confusion between what actually happened and what people wanted to believe. The Mary Celeste became less a story of maritime prudence and misfortune, and more a canvas for collective fears of the ocean. Every new generation of writers, filmmakers, and adventurers added their own layers, ensuring the ship's legend would endure long after her final voyage. Yet amidst the myths, there remained a truth grounded in evidence. Scholars and maritime experts continued to study the ship, analyzing the surviving logbooks, crew records, and cargo manifests. Even with the wildest imaginings, the skeleton of reality persisted: a competent crew, a sound ship, and the unexplained disappearance of 10 souls in the vast Atlantic. The Mary Celeste had become a paradox, a factual event so strange it invited endless fiction, but one that could still be examined scientifically. And it is in this tension, between documented fact and human imagination, that the next layer of her mystery emerges. Now that the myths and legends have been laid aside, it's time to examine the most credible explanations for what really happened aboard the Mary Celeste. Experts have spent decades analyzing every detail, from the cargo to the ship's condition to weather reports and maritime records. The question remains, what could compel a seasoned captain and his crew to leave a fully seaworthy ship in the middle of the Atlantic? One of the strongest theories involves the ship's cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. These barrels, stored below deck, were highly volatile. Over time, and especially during rough seas, some barrels may have leaked, releasing alcohol vapors into the confined hold. Experts today believe that such fumes could have reached dangerous concentrations, creating a strong risk of explosion. The crew may have heard rumblings or sensed a pressure buildup and assumed the ship was about to blow. To vent the fumes, Captain Briggs may have ordered the hatches thrown open and a temporary evacuation into the lifeboat. This decision, logical under extreme fear, would explain why the ship was left seaworthy, the cargo mostly untouched, and why vital navigational tools, the sextant, chronometer, and ship's log, were taken along. The personal items left behind, including clothing and toys, suggest they intended to return once the perceived danger had passed. Weather and ocean conditions may have contributed to the tragedy. Historical accounts indicate rough seas near the Azores in late November, including sudden squalls and unpredictable wind shifts. If the small lifeboat was tethered to the ship, a strong gust or rising wave could have snapped the line, leaving the crew adrift. In an open ocean, with no land in sight, and a fragile rowboat as their only refuge, survival would have been nearly impossible. Other natural explanations have been suggested, though none are as comprehensive as the fume theory. Some historians propose that a waterspout, or even a small localized tsunami, could have alarmed the crew. Another idea involves a seaquake, an underwater tremor that might have jolted the vessel and its cargo, causing panic. Each scenario fits pieces of the puzzle, but none accounts for all the details. The missing lifeboat, the undisturbed cargo, and the absence of violence or struggle. The genius of the alcohol fume theory is how it explains the mixture of order and urgency. The crew abandoned ship quickly, yet carefully. They took essential navigational instruments, but left behind non-essential items. They left a ship capable of sailing on its own, perfectly sound, yet they never returned. This combination of fear, rational decision-making under pressure, and bad luck may be the key to one of the most enduring mysteries in maritime history. Even today, experiments and simulations have supported this explanation. In 2006, researchers at University College London recreated the conditions of the ship's cargo hold and observed that vaporized alcohol could produce a sudden, terrifying blast without igniting the ship itself. Exactly the kind of event that would drive a prudent captain to act swiftly. In short, while nothing can prove precisely what Captain Briggs and his crew experienced in those 10 lost days, the alcohol fume panic remains the most scientifically grounded and plausible scenario. It transforms a ghost story into a cautionary tale about human response to danger, the unforgiving nature of the sea, and the tragic consequences of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. After the Mary Celeste was salvaged and brought into Gibraltar, her story continued long after the mystery of her vanished crew. Once the salvage hearings concluded, the ship returned to service, but her luck seemed irrevocably cursed. Over the next 12 years, she changed hands multiple times, each owner hoping to profit from her voyages, yet each plagued by misfortune. Collisions, leaks, and storms followed her, and her reputation as an unlucky vessel grew among sailors and merchants alike. The ship's final chapter came in 1885 under the command of Captain Gilman Parker. Her last owner, Wesley Gove, loaded her with a cargo of rubber boots and canned food, grossly overinsured, intending to commit insurance fraud. In a deliberate attempt to wreck the vessel, Parker ran her onto a reef off the coast of Haiti, but the Mary Celeste refused to sink. Investigators quickly uncovered the scheme, exposing the fraud and cementing her final inglorious end. The brigantine broke apart on the reef, leaving only memories and rumors behind. Though the ship itself was lost, the legend of the Mary Celeste has endured. She became the quintessential ghost ship, a symbol of the unexplained and the dangers of the sea. Every generation has added new layers of intrigue, fantastical tales of sea monsters, alien abduction, or Bermuda Triangle misadventures. Yet beneath the myths lies a story of human decisions, fear, and the unpredictable power of nature. Modern historians and maritime researchers continue to examine the evidence, relying on scientific reasoning and historical context. Most agree that the alcohol fume theory, combined with rough Atlantic weather, offers the most plausible explanation for the crew's disappearance. But without direct evidence, the fate of Captain Briggs, his family, and the 7 sailors will likely remain unknown forever. The Mary Celeste reminds us of the fragile line between safety and catastrophe at sea. One wrong interpretation of danger, one miscalculation in the open ocean, and an entire ship of people can vanish without a trace. Her story is both cautionary and captivating, a cold case that challenges our understanding of human behavior, maritime science, and the limits of mystery. So what really happened on that November night in 1872? We may never know. But the Mary Celeste endures as a timeless enigma, her empty deck drifting forever in the imagination of sailors, historians, and storytellers alike. And now, the question is yours. What do you think happened to Captain Briggs and his crew? Could fear and chemistry alone explain their disappearance? Or is there another secret hidden beneath the waves? The Atlantic keeps its secrets, and the legend of the Mary Celeste sails on.